Amanda. Sorry.
To thank you for joining us with the Women's Caucus. We are live for Women Who Loves Women. You know, we trying to L it up, as Rudy does say. So some housekeeping. We are recording this for clarity and so that we have the recordings to, if you are not, how to put it, if you are not okay with your name or your video being on, you can take off your video and change your name on the Zoom call. Also, we are live on Facebook as well. So if you are on Facebook, check Pride TT's or Pride UV's Facebook page and kindly share the feed around. So now I'll kindly hand you over to our moderator, Sharon. She will kick us off tonight.
Good night, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining what we hope will be an informative, interactive, and you're hearing that back noise? Okay, good, sorry, because I'm hearing it. Thank you for joining what we hope will be an informative, interactive, and open discussion on issues directly pertaining to same-gender loving intimacy, sex, and sexuality. This move was prompted by my having participated in a number of the sessions and workshops held over the last month. I was impressed by the planning and delivery of virtual spaces allowing us, the LGBTQIA community in Trinidad and Tobago, the opportunity to engage in a cross-section of topics that directly and indirectly impact our existence and well-being. Thank you, PrideTT, UV Pride, the Transgender Coalition, as well as the individual presenters and panelists who took the time, prepared, and engaged us in courageous conversations. It would have been a missed opportunity if the Women's Caucus did not also utilize the opportunity during Pride Month to engage with members of our constituency, well, it's election, so I have to say constituency. When the Women's Caucus first began engaging as a group, we felt it necessary to ensure that as we defined ourselves, it was essential to embrace women who love women, irrespective of how they define, whether as lesbian, bisexual, same-gender loving, non-binary, non-conforming, etc. For those of us who may not be aware of the diversity that exists within our subgroup, Amanda will enlighten us during her session. Tonight's session will be moderated by 5 incredible women and me. Our objective is to engage you all in issues that are sometimes just as hidden as we are. There will be 5 sessions broken into 20-minute dialogues with questions and answers after the first and second 2 sessions and at the end of the last session. Sharon and Epiphany would facilitate our first session, presenting challenges and concerns experienced by younger same-gender loving sisters and trans men. Amanda will lead us through a discussion on sexual diversity within the female same-gender loving community. We will then have 10 minutes of question and answers, followed by Faye, who will share with us what it means to be getting old and be same-gender loving, right? Because for those of us who are over 50, that's our primary concern. I will explore issues around intimacy and sex. And then we'll have another 10-minute question and answer session. And then Nadine, who would have been listening and taking notes, will seek to provide us some feedback on how we go about addressing our concerns and coping in healthy ways. So that's how we will run tonight. I just want to establish some ground rules. So our aim is to create a safe space and to do no harm. So in that aspect, we will try to respect, we will respect each other's opinions, even when they differ from our own. We'll try not to cut people off or cut across each other. We will be respectful in our feedback, refraining from using harmful language. So things like stupid and dumb won't come up, right, women? We'll be aware of each other's time, ensuring that we leave room for our counterparts to also contribute. And then also, this is key, to mute our mics when we're not talking. Are there any other ground rules or anything else that anybody who is participating want to add at this point? Okay, so then let's kick it off. So we will start with Sharon and Epiphany. Welcome.
Hi, good night, guys. I'm Shahan. PrideTT20 PRO.
And I am Epiphany. So sorry, my mic is giving trouble, everyone. Sorry, my name's Epiphany. I am PrideTT20's events manager.
So tonight, Epiphany and I, we would co-panel this segment. So we sent out a questionnaire to the community asking persons that we looked for in our age bracket, which is between 18 to 30, to fill out this questionnaire with some questions. So we would, I would go through the statistical analysis part of it, and then when we get to the questions that the persons left, we would Epiphany and I will divide and conquer as much questions as we could answer. And then hopefully maybe if like we can't answer that certain questions, our panelists may jump in and answer those questions as well. So we sent out the questionnaire giving around 4 to 5 days. And we had 17 people in total filling out the questionnaire, which is women who love women. And 13 persons were between our age bracket, which is 20 to 30. So we had 13 persons within that age bracket and 4 persons between the more experienced bracket. I don't want to say old before Sharon and Faye come for me. So the more experienced bracket between 40 and 53 years of age. So that was the age bracket was quite good in terms of what we wanted to achieve. We might have wanted more people, but we take what we get and we are very grateful. Another question we asked is, how do you identify, meaning if you are lesbian, gay, transgender, bisexual, etc. How do you identify on the spectrum? We had 5 persons who are bisexual, 8 persons who are lesbians, who identify as lesbians, 2 pansexuals, and 1 non-binary person. We also had 1 person who filled out the questionnaire who didn't really identify on the spectrum. So assuming they are an ally if they don't identify on such spectrum. We also asked the question because we wanted to get an idea of who are out, like if you are openly out to anyone. So majority of the persons, 14 out of the 17 persons were out and 3 are still closeted as they filled out the questionnaire. So the questions in terms of, one of the questions we asked were, what are some of the fears you have in terms of a woman who loves women? So some of the answers that were given, we categorized them so we don't pick up much time. So we categorized them and we had the criteria, the answers were along the lines of family neglect and rejection. So some of them were afraid of their families kicking them out or they're not having a place to stay. So that are some of their fears. So they may not come out to their families. They might faster come out to some friends who, who hopefully the blowback in terms of going to their families would not exist. We also have discrimination. Discrimination in terms of being out in public with your partner. So, sometimes in Trinidad, I firsthand have experience in both my relationships, past and present, that when you're out with your partner, you're going to get the look. We all get this look, like, okay, why are you holding this person's hand? Why are you so close to them? And stuff like that. And one person also said that they were approached by men accosted them and asked them to kiss their partner in public because they're gay, and they felt quite uncomfortable to do such. um, Others are discrimination by association, and in the workplace by association, we meaning like if you have a child and you identify as a lesbian, when the children in school find out, okay, Johnny mother is a lesbian, so they might face discrimination and being bullied as well. Other fears that they have are safety. They don't feel safe in being a lesbian or being a woman who loves women. And one of the other fears is communication. So communication between themselves and their partner, or communication between themselves and families as well. So Epiphany, you could handle the next question.
You do me be a doll and read the question for me, please.
The other question is, what are some of your hopes?
Yes. So, from the questions that we got, most of the hopes from how I put them together were equal rights and protection, which is not something that is not that we have never heard of. It's something that people of the entire LGBTQI plus have been fighting for years. So it's nothing new to us. As well as marriage, the right to marry. Another hope is to have no discrimination, and I want to say that is kind of broad, because the discrimination can be directly at women who love women, or, as Sharon said in the previous question, to the individuals who face these things because of association. As I'm pretty sure I'm not a mother as yet, but I have siblings and I have relatives who are younger than me, and I kid you not, I would trip the hell off if somebody was to attack them because of who I am, because it's actually very relatable. We see it, believe it or not, with parents to children, where because of the relationship your parents had with someone, even if it was just on a professional level, their experience is taken out on you. So if you even want that in that spectrum, it's the same thing for being bullied by association, for lack of a better word. Another hope was for the stereotypes um, to be, let's say, addressed, because I don't believe people say these things and they're not aware that they are one. Their sarcasm isn't really sarcasm, it's being flat out disrespectful. It's insultive, it's rude, especially the straight passing. Everyone on the Zoom and the live, you all need to be aware of something. Lesbian, bisexual, gay, trans, there is no such thing as a look. Okay? This is not a identifying factor. You cannot look at someone and assume these things. Assumptions, as Trinidadians like to say, you make an ass out of yourself. Do not do that. Try your best not to assume. And that, for me, I actually relate a lot with that hope being changed, because assumptions make life for women who love women difficult because we walk on eggshells so that we don't make you feel uncomfortable, which shouldn't be because we are trying to make you feel comfortable when you are actually being disrespectful to us. But that's the society we live in. Another hope is for love, for the ability. Somebody's mic is open. Sorry, right?
And
For the ability to love freely, to love whoever you want without the discrimination. Because on the bracket of love, I did a little bit of research. Thank the Lord. The Lord sent me a movie. Um, it is actually a proven fact that in the times of, let's say, in the time of Jesus, where the Egyptians ruled, it's a proven fact that these labels didn't exist. These labels that we are categorized and boxed into did not exist. As long as you were faithful to your partner, that is all that mattered. If you were not faithful, well, of course, in those times, you were beheaded. They didn't care if it was a man or a woman or the person identified as vice versa. The guillotine that we all like to watch medieval movies about, that was their source of weaponry. But at the end of the day, these boxes were not there. Big, famous, historical kings and queens of the, like, especially of places like England, were ruled by people who were of our community, especially the queens, especially the queens. So, Shahan, would you be a doll and do the next question?
sure. One of the points, because we had hashed this out together last night. And one of the points, I think Epiphany forgot or probably ran past by mistake, is that one of the hopes is that women speak out against discrimination and abuse,
My
right?
apologies.
Which is I think one of the strong ones in terms of that, because as women we often feel like we don't have a voice, and especially those who are being abused, they are not taken seriously the first time the abuse is filed. So I think that we need to have more support for those women out there, even regardless of the situation. We need to empower them. With Pride TT's um theme for this year is being be empowered by your pride. We should take that first word empowered and empower women to speak out against whatever discrimination they may face or abuse they may be putting again. They may have happening to them. The other question that we had was, what are some of your challenges? So being a woman who loves women, the big one that was recurrent was religion. Because when you come out of the closet, especially in a religious household, the first thing you are told is that it is against your religion to be who you are. I'm categorizing that to include everyone, right? To be who you are. And that is not the case, because we had a faith session a couple weeks ago, and the only religious background that was not represented, because something came up with that panelist, was the Muslim faith. All other faiths were represented, right? And I'm just putting this out there. You guys can go back on PrideTT's Facebook page and find the religious night that we had. It is not against any religion to be part of the spectrum. It is absolute. It has nothing against you, and it is, all religions are welcoming. It's just people tend to misinterpret what the the various books say and what happens, because some things aren't taught in some religions as well. So if you are one of those who, one of your challenges are religion, take a look at the faith night we had. It should clear up some questions and concerns you may have. One of the other challenges were safe spaces where persons part of the spectrum could be themselves. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, anyone who is aware of those in Trinidad, I don't think we have any safe spaces in Trinidad and Tobago other than when we probably have little meetings here and there. There aren't really any safe spaces for persons to go to just have a day or stuff like that. Right? Because I think one of the clubs that it had in Port of Spain, I think was Drink or something like that. I can't remember the name. That was LGBTQ friendly, sorry, TLGBTQ friendly. They closed down. So we don't really have much safe spaces anymore where people could go to be themselves. Challenges, well, I think all of the questions had this was marriage, and that is something that we are hoping to get in the near but distant future in terms of same-sex marriages in Trinidad and Tobago, and just marriage on the whole in Trinidad and Tobago for persons part of the spectrum as well. Because if the heterosexual persons are allowed to get married, why can't the persons part of the TLGBTQ plus spectrum, why we can't be afforded that right as well? Um, the last three on that list was being misgendered,
Mm.
because a lot of people are misgendered. I, for one, have, and I'm watching Epiphany's face. I think I can speak for the both of us. We both probably have been misgendered because I tend to dress more masculine, and she at times tend to dress more masculine as well. So people tend to probably stop us and ask us, "Are you a guy? Or are you a boy?" or stuff like that. Because I have had an incident where I was in a shop on my way to work, and this lady, she was like, "Are you a boy?" I was like, "No, I'm not. I'm a girl." But I would bear her indulgence because that shirt that I had on that day probably made me look like a guy, but still being misgendered, especially for our transgender the friends, they are often misgendered as well. And I think what another talk, Sharon, that I think we should put out sometime after Pride Month is that the use of pronouns, because I think
Yes.
pronouns are important, especially persons who identify as gender fluid, the asexual folk, the non-binary folk as well. Pronouns are important, and we need to bring more awareness to pronouns to be for that the misgendering to kind of ease a little bit.
Yes. To
Um,
just to jump in with you on that, Shahan,
so
with regards to the misgendering, I believe people need to be aware of one simple fact. The same way that it's rude to ask a woman how much she weighs or what is her age, it's rude to ask somebody if they're male and female. Because that's not, if they choose to tell you, no problem. But don't make it your business to force them to tell you.
agreed with that. And also one just putting it out there. We have a lot of transgendered persons living amongst us, right? Some may not have transitioned fully yet, but they are in the process of the transitioning period. So if you see this person, they kind of looking male, but they dress female, kindly use their proper pronouns, please, as she, her, or if it's the other way around, he, him. Please don't misgender the person. Just like how the heterosexuals wouldn't like somebody accidentally misgendering them for whatever purpose, please don't misgender the person's part of the TLGBTQ spectrum. Um, Last 2 points under that question was discrimination by peers and religious institutions. So I think the discrimination by peers falls along the category of a lot of people will discriminate because you're probably gay or you're probably lesbian bisexual, transgender, gender fluid, genderqueer, asexual, non-binary, and the list goes on. People would discriminate against that, and that is not fair to someone because you're not going to discriminate a heterosexual person for something. Granted, sometimes you are discriminated because of your race or religion or what have you. Discrimination needs to stop because you do not know what that could cause this person in terms of their mental capacity as well. Because some persons discrimination is kind of is going along the lines of bullying as well. So it could be that could fall there. Some people you discriminate them and or bully them at the same time, and that could throw them off and possibly lead them to having suicidal thoughts or attempting suicide. And those terrible things that we don't want to happen because oftentimes we lose persons, part of our family and our community and the spectrum because they are bullied and discriminated against because who they love and how they identify as. That needs to stop. Religious institutions, I'm going to put this as bluntly as I could, but trying not to be disrespectful to the religious institutions as well, right? Read your facts properly. Stop misinterpreting everything and the scriptures because you do not want people who are queer or part of the LGBTQ spectrum in your congregation, right? Because the Lord loves everyone, however you identify the Lord to be, they love you for who you are. So stop doing that because that again is a heavy part of persons being kicked out of their house because the religious aspect of it. Be proper religious leaders and allow everyone to come in and allow them to be able to pray with the other people as well.
One
Last,
thing I would say,
oh, go ahead.
one thing I would say about the religious aspect is that we need to remember one very important key factor that I think is lost in prayer. At the end of the day, all of these religious books, no matter what you may read or have been taught, they are all written by mankind. Carry on, Shahan.
I agree with that because it's probably misinterpreted. So read your facts properly, and sometimes Wikipedia might have some discrepancies, but sometimes Wikipedia does help you a lot. That's all I'm going to say because I could ramble on about religion, especially mine, but I'm not going to do such. Um, Finding partners. So one of those things of the challenges is finding partners because then again we don't have spaces where you can meet somebody who you identify with. So I think that safe spaces is one of them. If you want to tackle the last question really quickly,
Sure, no
last
problem.
question is what are some of your needs?
The needs, yes, yes. A lot of people in synopsis, I would just list them all and just give a quick synopsis as we're running on our time. People were saying that they need to have more events to congregate with, to meet people, as well as to have more safety, more support, have a community, and to be allowed to self-express. And all of these things, I would say that we as individuals all have to come together and state for a fact that, if this is what you want to do, then don't just talk about it in the closet. Pond not intended. Right. You have the avenues now. You may not have before, but you have it now. If you have an opinion as you are on a live with us or on a Zoom, send us a message. Who knows? We might even use your opinions, and we might get events to be kicked off the floor. And one thing I know for all of the members that I have met throughout this entire Pride Month, we always give credit where credit is due. Whether you want to stay anonymous or not is up to you. But all of these things can only be done if, we see that this is what you all want to do. We can't just put it together if we know nobody's going to come out or nobody's going to act on it. But
True.
that is a synopsis.
Sharon, before I hand back over to you, indulge me for one more minute, please. Thank you. One of the persons who are asking for events, we have one for you on Sunday. Granted that we have this tropical storm about to hit us between tonight and tomorrow. And I have said, and was also said to me by my Standard 5 teacher, I am quoting him, rain does only stop cricket. Right? Party, we in a bus, we chances are we in AC, right? Rain only stops cricket. So come out. That event I'm speaking about on Sunday is our motorcade. So we are closing off Pride Month for that. We having our motorcade and after party. So visit PrideTT's website at PrideTT.com or PrideTT's Facebook page to register for the motorcade. And one of the things, an initiative we are trying to do is that I, along with some friends of mine, and with the support of Pride TT, we are launching Uni Pride. So that is a representation for all Pride students across all the universities in Trinidad and Tobago. We are not directly affiliated with one university, but it's somewhere where everyone can get representation and you all have a group of persons to talk to as well. So stay tuned for that. The social medias will be launching at 12 midnight on the 26th of July, right? So stay tuned for that. Thank you for indulging us. Sharon, I hand it back over to you.
Thank you, Shahan. Thank you, Epiphany. And then we could share a little more about activities and stuff as the evening progresses. But we want to move swiftly over to Amanda to lead us through her session. Amanda, welcome.
Hi, good afternoon, evening, everyone. I am Amanda McIntyre. I need some indication that people are hearing me. Sharon, could you just, right, great, I could see you. Wonderful. I'm Amanda McIntyre. I am an author and an advocate, employed presently as an advocacy and policy specialist. And this evening, I will be talking about sexual diversity and the importance of creating safe, non-judgmental spaces for women as they navigate their sexual journey. So I've made a list of 10 talking points, so I will just put them out, and then as you have questions or concerns, you may feel free to jump in. Okay? So concerning the navigation of queer spaces, it is important that these spaces are safe for women, people who identify as women, non-gender conforming people, non-gender binary people, safe for them to understand queer sexuality with an understanding that these things are not what we were taught as children. When we received our primary and secondary socialization, most of us, I am saying most of us because I understand that some people were raised in very progressive homes, but most of us were brought up in homes in which heterosexuality and heteronormativity were represented all around us in media and even through the instructions of our parents. So for persons who were not raised in progressive environments that allowed for wider representation of sexuality, it is important for us as advocates to create spaces in which queer persons can understand queer sexuality, and may learn these either as they go along in an intuitive process of self-discovery, or learn from others, or learn from other educational programs that may be set up and that may be instructive. It is also important that safe spaces be created with an understanding that we, as queer people, are more than just our sexuality, that we have family life, we have social life, education, careers, religions, and a host of other pursuits that may or may not be related to our sexuality, but these spaces that we create, these safe spaces we create, must be supportive of the whole person with an understanding of human complexity. These spaces that we create must be safe for the identification of queer identities, the identification of women who identify as queer, women who identify as lesbian, women who identify as bisexual, women who don't want to identify as any of these, but just understand intuitively that they are women who love women, women who identify as trans women, women who identify as trans men, men who identify as trans men, women who identify as non-gender binary people, non-gender binary people who identify as non-gender binary people, women who identify as non-gender conforming people, and non-gender conforming people who identify as non-gender conforming people. And the reasons why I made those clear distinctions is because in the research that has been conducted into queer identification, there are so many distinctions between one identity and the next that the only conclusion that we can come to is that gender is fluid and continues to move unevenly along the spectrum. It is also, moving on to the next point, it is also important to create safe spaces for positive gender expression with an understanding of gender as a social construct, with an understanding of gender as performance that engages dress, speech, and movement, and with an understanding of, as I said before, gender as fluid. Important to create safe spaces for gender expression that address the toxic or destructive expressions of gender. For example, the ideas of masculinity as having to be violent, or the ideas that femininity is weak. So these safe spaces must not only support positive expressions of gender, but also address, identify, and safely address when gender expressions become toxic or destructive. Next point, these spaces must be safe for the transition of trans women and the transition of trans men. So we are into creating safe transitional spaces. Next, safe recreational spaces. Recreational spaces that polices and addresses problems within the spaces as well. One of the things that I have noted in the last 10 years is that the queer community is adept at recreation, adept at throwing parties, adept at socialization, like secondary socialization, but we are not so keen on policing and addressing negative things that happen within those recreational spaces. So problems such as sexual grooming, not only sexual grooming of minors, but sexual grooming of people who are now beginning to realize, as Sharon was noting in one of our sessions previously, people who are now beginning to realize their sexuality and now beginning to explore their sexuality, that they too are susceptible to sexual grooming, and also spaces that police and address issues of substance abuse. I have been to many a party in the queer community where drugs was just available, but for some reason, when we get into conversations around safety within communities, we never address it. It's almost like just this thing that happens and nobody talks about it. But if we are to have forward-thinking conversations around the construction of queer spaces, then we must deal with these things as well. Safe recreational spaces that address violence. Violence that is not just physical violence, that is emotional violence, that is psychological violence, that is epistemological, I would say, because when I think of certain violent treatments that trans identified people face, a lot of it happens sometimes not just in speech but also in writing. So the ways in which certain certain social media posts are constructed may be taken as perfectly normal to someone who does not have that experience, but then to someone who does, it might be quite damaging. And we, if we want to create and promote safe spaces in our community, we must be cognizant of those things as well. I'm sorry if you're hearing some noises in the background. That is the wonderful ambience of Belmont. The next point is the creation of safe sexual health and reproductive health practices, creation of safe spaces within which we understand safe sexual and safe reproductive health practices. And these include, and I must put at the top of this list, just understanding consent. And while in the conversation around sex, this seems like a very basic thing, the Life in Leggings movement and the Me Too movement proved to us that some of the things we may take for granted are things that are still great concerns, not just in the queer community, but in wider society as well. And I feel, well, not feel, this is not a feeling at all, this is actually fact, that in queer communities, because of the stigma associated with queer identifications, the reporting of certain violence, especially sexual violence, is underrepresented, right? So persons who may experience rape or other sexual assault in the queer community from a same-sex partner or um, from anyone, they may not report it, or they may not feel free to tell somebody else about it, or they may not feel safe to tell someone else about it simply because of how it occurred, and also depending on the level at which they may have internalized oppressions such as shame and the negative aspects of personal accounts. So we have to create, as I said at the top of the point, spaces that are safe in terms of sexual health. And one point we have to note is understanding consent. Then understanding sex itself, just sex as a phenomena in the queer community. If we can only achieve such a thing as creating a safe space within people feel free to learn about sex, that would be a great and wonderful achievement. And in the last 100,000 years of queer people being on planet Earth, we are still trying to collate information concerning sexual practice in queer communities. And there's a lot of it. And at the same time, even when I talk to people now, I still learn new things. Last year, for example, I did a painting called Two Man Rat One Hole. And the purpose of that work was just to write down all the new sexual terms that I had learned within that year. And it is something that continues to evolve because human society continues to evolve, right? So this is why, as much as we try and try and try, it's like the bottomless pit, the bucket that always has to be poured into, because people do different things from one generation to the next. People not only understand themselves in ways that they express differently, but they understand themselves in ways according to the ethos of their generation. So a person who may have been a young adult in the 1970s can, but at a certain time must understand the limitations with which they compare themselves to a person who may have been born in the last 20 years. We also have to aim towards the creation of safe spaces for an understanding of sexual and reproductive health in terms of use of toys and other items for sexual stimulation. And I know that among women who love women, trans-identified women, lesbians, bisexual, trans men, this is popular the use of sex toys and other objects for stimulation. Now, this is a wide cultural phenomenon internationally, but it is necessary for us to safely understand it's within the context of our community, and especially in terms of how it affects us in our sexual health practice, sexual health awareness, and sexual and reproductive health. Yes. Also understanding STDs and STIs. One of the points I continue to be baffled by is myth, this myth in the queer community that if you are a queer woman, and I'm going to use queer here as an umbrella word encompassing the spectrum, though I can easily be challenged by that, and if you want to have that conversation, we can. But there is this myth that queer women cannot contract STDs or cannot contract STIs, and that's not so at all. It is quite possible because our sexual engagement with other people remain our business. And even if someone identifies in a particular way and says certain things to you, you ultimately have certain responsibilities, not just to yourself, but to all the people that you may be having sexual relationships with. So one of my hopes this evening was that we would have been joined by Dr. Joseph, who is a gynecologist who would have been prepared to go in depth on this. And I do have some information. So once we are coming back to these points, if you want to go further into that, I welcome the questions around it. The next point is the creation of safe spaces that addresses, and I mentioned above, but I have here as a separate point because again, in not just research, but in observation as well, domestic violence in the queer community is real, under-identified, underreported, and we were painfully reminded of this in the month of June when the bill went before Parliament, and we saw one of the reasons why, part of the reason why is because in law, queer people are underrepresented. In wider society, even though the population of Trinidad and Tobago continues to say in surveys that they don't mind queer people so long as they also don't allow for safe spaces for people to say if something incorrect is taking place with their partner or something incorrect is taking place in the home. So many queer people, regardless of how they identify, but tonight we're specifically dealing with queer women, live and are parts of situations of intimate partner violence and may not receive the necessary support within those relationships from civil society and from other allies necessary for them to navigate those relationships in ways that are safest to them and to the people that they interact with. And so in our continued processing around the creation of safe spaces for queer women, we have to keep in mind the identification and addressing of domestic violence in queer spaces. Next, I have the creation of safe spaces that support people who are in need of physical assistance. So people who need wheelchairs, people who need other equipments that would aid them physically in any way, people who need sign language interpreters, people who need special care in terms of guidance for visibility. So once people are in need of physical assistance, queer spaces must be prepared to not only think around, but to actually follow through with the design and implementation of structural support that would assist them so that their experience of queer community is as productive and fulfilling as it can be. Next, the creation of safe spaces for queer people in which persons understand their position within the law of the country. And this is a point I noted in terms of my own understanding of how very important constitutional reform is. That we as Trinidad and Tobago in 2018 went into like international news with the Jones judgment that decriminalized same-sex practice, same-sex sexual practice. And why, one of the reasons I should say why that was a landmark legal matter, not just in Trinidad and Tobago, but internationally, was it reminded people, it reminded individual people of just how much power they have in terms of constitutional reform and in terms of how constitutional reform affects the implementation of policies that protect them and policies that give way to an enabling of their complete expression of their complex humanity. And of course, we're not near complete expression of our complex humanity because there are so many issues in law that still criminalize those things, but understanding the law and understanding how we can impact on constitutional reform helps us to move closer and closer to that ideal. Next, the creation of safe spaces for persons to enjoy positive mental health and to enjoy compassionate treatment of any mental health concern. And next, finally, I have, which was not initially part of the list, but I felt the need to put it on there, a safe space in which we can make mistakes. You know, not everybody is perfect, not everybody is au courant in terms of the language of advocacy. Not everyone had the privilege of growing up in homes that were very progressive in terms of politics. Not everyone had the privilege of being even in social circles as young people in which the politics were very positive. And so even within queer communities, you may find things that upset you. You may find things that deeply hurt you. You may find things that are in fact damaging. But that doesn't mean that the people, the person, the entity, or whatever should just be thrown away. It means that we could understand, you know, that people make mistakes. And in this space, in this safe space, people are allowed to make mistakes. And not just to make the mistake, but allowed to reflect on their mistake, allowed to learn from their mistake, and allowed to grow from it with an understanding that we are complex people, we create complex entities, and we are much more than just one mistake, and we can in fact learn and grow beyond that. So my beautiful friends, this is these are the points that I have for tonight, and I welcome questions and comments that can move the discussion forward. Now, one of the points that Shahan mentioned before was concerning whether or not there are really safe spaces in Trinidad and Tobago. I thought that was a really important point because it reminded me of some research that I did in 2019 around the topic of the of making spaces, making traditional spaces of heteronormative leisure available to queer youth. And in assessing Trinidad and Tobago, the space that was a traditional space of heteronormative leisure that we zoned in on was the space of Carnival. And it was really interesting because within Carnival, there is so much queer expression. Ever since the early movement of Carnival in the late 18th century and early 19th century, there have always been queer bodies in Carnival, always. But in terms of formal representation of queer life or queer sexuality, that had only happened but a few times. One of the times it happened on a very large scale was with Peter Minshall's The Dying Swan. And one of the things I hope, because Carnival is such an accessible space for expression of queer culture, one of the things I hope would continue to happen is the continued queering of Trinidad and Tobago's Carnival, which was the title of the paper that I did this work on, Queering Trinidad and Tobago's Carnival. and then to move beyond just this traditional space of heteronormative leisure into queering other spaces. So what Pride UE, for example, is doing is the queering of the university space. What PrideTT is doing on a national scale is the queering of public spaces at a certain time of the year. So our challenge and actionable item can be to move beyond just these things into queering, into further queering of traditional spaces of heteronormative activity in Trinidad and Tobago. So that's it. Any questions or concerns or points for discussion?
Well, Amanda, I think that was an incredible session. I like that queering, that further queering of spaces, right, Nadine? I think we should queer some spaces. I think one of the things that the Women's Caucus, when we came into being, it was really based on that, the call and the need for a space where just women who loved women could come together and congregate and talk about just anything, cry, be provided with support, etc. But let me see, does anyone else have any questions or observations based on what was shared by Shahan, Epiphany, or Amanda? Because we have about 10 minutes that we allocated for questions and answers. So if you have any input to bring on those first two sessions, you can, before we move on. Anything? Good people, don't be shy now. I'm even, let me look across the Facebook thingy. I'm not seeing anything on Facebook. No question. Wait a minute, don't tell me we have a quiet set of women here tonight. Well, look at my thing. Where Brandy? Nadine, I can't hear you unless you unmute.
No, I didn't want to say anything because I will say it, what I have to say at the end, and I don't want to take up space for any that other people could ask questions.
Okay.
But your comment might spur some questions if you have any.
Well, so I'm listening to all three young women, and really thank you so much for what y'all have shared. And I was grounding what they were saying in the theme of this evening, intimacy. And I was thinking, a lot of times when we think of intimacy, we actually only think about sexual intimacy. And we don't recognize how important, there's like 5 different types of intimacy. And I don't want to get into it now because I will talk about that when I'm wrapping up. But it's so important, it is so evident that because, especially when you identify as queer, that you don't get opportunities to practice certain kinds of intimacy. So not just about physical intimacy, there's intellectual intimacy, there's emotional intimacy, there's experiential intimacy, and spiritual intimacy. And all those kinds of intimacies help develop a well-rounded person who can do healthy relationships. And when you rob people of certain opportunities to experience all those kinds of intimacies, you're denying them growth and development. Yeah, and I'm seeing from what Amanda said and what Shahan and Epiphany said, that we have robbed women, particularly women who love other women, of certain kinds of experiences. And we'll talk about that later when we end. Yeah.
Okay, great. I see Shivani saying hi to us, Nadine. Hi, Nadine. Hi, I'm going to say hi, love. Yes, wave to her. Okay. Okay, well, let's move on. Because then, let's continue talking and we may have more questions as we go through the night. And I already see you're starting to cover things that I plan to talk about, but that's okay. So you see what I mean, right? That's why I say, oh God, should I come down?
They touch on some things that I have to bring.
All right, so let's go straight on to Faye now, everybody. Hi,
give me the ability to share my screen, please.
Shahana, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Okay, Faye, try it now.
Don't, what are you all seeing?
Share screen. No, we're still seeing you.
Mm-hmm. Yep. All right. You're seeing something there, right?
Yes, we're seeing a
Yeah.
questionnaire.
Well, responses to a questionnaire. Trying to get another screen
Yeah.
up. All right. So, somehow this Pride season have become the go-to elder. I'm not sure how that happened, but it has happened. I'm going to wear the age cap and show it. All right. So I'm gonna take this off a little bit. Trying to minimize as much as possible here. So I'm going to talk about some of the needs and concerns of aging women who love women. And somebody corrected me about using the term elder, so I will go with seniors. Not sure which one sounds better, but anyway. In 2018, I had this idea that I had been playing around with for years to do some research within the community, especially with women who love women. Unfortunately, when I started it in 2018, and that was late 2018, I started it, I then had to deal with my own health scare, which was I got diagnosed with cancer. I knew I was probably going to have to face that big C, but it was confirmed on the first working day of 2019. And that just totally changed my entire view. And I put my research aside. But during the time of October or November there, so I was able to glean some responses for the research and surveys that I sent out. And I used that to get to this. So here are some of our concerns, right? As women who love women and aged over 50, we have lived to see progress in our country. We saw and participated in a public pride parade. We buried and said our goodbyes to many loved ones to the AIDS epidemic. We lived in fear. We experienced homophobia, abuses, violence, and gender equality. Some of those have morphed into tolerance and some acceptance. But somehow, equality still seems a very distant dream. Our lives are complex and varies, and our stories unforgettable. But there are more years to live. However, we still have to face huge challenges. Some of these challenges and the major areas of concern for me, and as a senior, and from the little bit of research that I've done, and I really want to open up this research a lot more, and the areas are poverty and reduced economic security, social isolation, health, and all of those things while we still face sexism and racism. Anybody who has a question or want to clarify something, just stop me when you need me to. So under poverty and reduced economic security, and believe me, I live this, many of our community people have not finished school. Now, we've dropped out due to violence, bullying. When parents learn about them, they sometimes throw us out of the house. We are forced to leave. We were beaten, or we face mental challenges that we do not finish school, and therefore, sorry? Can somebody mute me up, please? Right, so our ability to earn an income is seriously diminished. We also face employment discrimination when people And sometimes before we even figure out ourselves, the outside world seems to figure us out before we do. And we face discrimination. Many of our employee handbooks on benefits do not protect LGBT persons or women who love women. There are few handbooks which includes sexual orientation in their anti-discrimination clauses within those packages. Now, as we get older, of course, we face retirement. Again, that brings our income to a limited amount. Some of us are unable to work due to health issues which always come up with aging. And we are also unable to work because we end up being caregivers, sometimes for the same homophobic parents that we have, or our partners may be aging, may be older than us, or may have health issues. And like me, having to face my health challenge, my savings is now no more. I still have a limited income, and I consider myself slightly disabled because I have challenges with my knees. And I know many of you out there might be able to say, I have some issues too, as in you're facing your own health issues. Now, we are sometimes unable to access social welfare for many reasons. If we haven't worked and we haven't paid NIS, or even if we worked, we may not have worked for someone, so we were self-employed, being creative people as we are. We may not have paid any NIS, and therefore will not be able to access those type of social welfare grants and so forth. And due to our loss of income, we risk of losing our safe and affordable housing. Sometimes we haven't even been able to afford housing at all. I mean, we continue to rent. And then when people learn about us, or as we get older, people might want to raise the rent and so forth, and sometimes we are asked to leave. Due to health issues and being a caregiver, we are often away from work for long periods of time, and therefore we might end up losing the little bit of employment that we have, because people just cannot deal with a worker who is away so much. And we're not like the US and in some places where they have a Caregivers Act, which actually provides days off for people who are caregivers. We're not like that, and that's something we probably have to look into, the NGOs and so forth, or maybe we elders can get together and create our own NGO to see about what we're doing. And as a result of all of that, we end up having to return to homophobic family homes because there's no other support. We talked about safe spaces, Amanda. We don't have any right here. Even shelters here are very, very homophobic. And over the years, I've worked with the other NGOs and so forth when we've been trying to get temporary housing for persons who've been displaced. We have not been able to. If we have, it was a day or 2 days. And we are not welcome as young people, far less as we get older. Are you all seeing any questions, or I can go on? Anybody wants to unmute and let me know?
Oh, you can go on, sorry.
Thanks. Okay, so from my limited data, and it's limited, it was just about a few responses. When I say few, it's 13. As I said, I put this on hold and I haven't been able to get back at it because it took me all of 2019 to mentally get in a space where I'm okay to go back to functioning, when I say functioning, to think of myself as having a future, because you hear the word cancer and you sort of like shut down and think, it's the end of my days. But I was one of the lucky ones, and I'll get into that a little bit later. So 31% of the responses earn less than $5,000 per month. So you see there where it's very difficult for people to access anything. including things regarding health or housing. It was surprising to note of the four elders that completed the survey, three of them earned more than $10,000 per month, which is, I guess, part of it would be explained as you grow older and you get more experience and you get promotions within your job, your income tends to increase along with those promotions. And as your skills and knowledge bank also increases. So social isolation. Now, when we start discovering ourselves or we take the chance and come out, we risk the loss of our blood families due to stigma and discrimination. You're forced to leave home, or you leave home because they're telling you things like, you can't be like this if you want to live in this house. Most of us have lived alone, or we've shared with other members of the community. And as we get older and as life goes on, things tend to change. So we might lose, and we in the community, when we lose our blood families, what we did as younger persons is that we've created our own families. You know, we found those safe spaces along the way, even if it was just the lime in the bar with some members of the community. Those were our families. You know, we could share with them. We go and sleep by them every so night. They give us a plate of food when we didn't have. Bohemia in particular was a very safe space for many young people coming out. Cyrus and Godfrey were very much open. They had a bed, they had food, they had sometimes change of clothes and so forth. So as we join in relationships and we get older, our partner may die or the relationship would end. But now that we're older and if we've been in a relationship, we have lost sometimes the sense of community. Somehow women who love women tend to, as Sharon, we have this little nest. We create our little home and we isolate ourselves from the rest of society because, oh, we're a thing, right? No response. Yeah, so we create our own little nest, sort of. And anything that happens, yeah, yes.
I said, okay, I unmuted because you're making me. I say, pussy was sweet.
Yes, it was. And you didn't want to, you didn't want to bring that out in the community for fear sometimes that somebody might spot it and want to take it, or the person might just leave, right? So anyway, when that relationship ends, we're then in a situation where, oh, how do we get back on the dating scene? It is so uncomfortable. Where do we go? Who do we meet? Everybody will know the relationship ended. What are we going to tell people? What people saying about us behind our back? All these things that everybody goes through when that happens. It's not unique to our community. Sometimes you might think it's even more because for some reason, we tend to, as I say, we come from a broken people or from people who face so much negativity that we tend to push back against that negativity by throwing a lot of it at a lot of people also. There are no venues at this point to socialize. So how do we meet people? So I think it came up in the survey that Sharon and Epiphany did. Where do they meet people? Where do they socialize? They want to be able to meet and greet and talk with people. And we feel ostracized as older persons, as seniors. Sometimes people just look at us and like, what they're doing here. If we were to go to when we had the clubs, right? What these old people come to do? Well, we come to do the same thing all you do it. Meeting people, talk. Denise might not allow us to dance, and if Leslie was on, she'd probably say that her two friends, Lily and I can't remember the name of other, will help us stand and dance. And many of us don't have children. Some of us have children from former relationships. Some of us, very few of us, tend to bring children into our relationships, but for the majority, there are no children. So as we get older, who's going to take care of us? Who's going to help us? Who do we reach out for support? Now, according to EGALE, which is the organization for gays and lesbians, 52% of the community of seniors fear being forced back into the closet in residential care. So you don't have anybody to take care of you, you're concerned, you might end up in residential care. We know, we've seen some of the videos on Facebook.
You're going outside?
Hi, Brandy.
Hi.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was on doing one of the other things. The movie night is here, going on, and getting the girls together and fixing them up, sorting them out. It was a lot, but it's a really fantastic movie. I'm sorry I had to leave, but I need to be on this call also.
No problem. Just mute and again listen to us.
Great, great.
Right. So here are some simple solutions for social isolation. Let us create social activities for the seniors. Invite the youngsters to it. You might have been on the one with Generation Gap, where Leslie talked about her porch limes. Maybe something like that will work. Other types of monthly activities. The problem with that right now is having a venue for it. It's going to be costly because there are no places right now. Groups don't have offices or whatever that we could get into, but we'll try to work around those type of barriers. And we all need to challenge our biases regarding older folks. We're just getting older. We funny. We could be bitchy. We like to dress, some of us. We don't like to dress. Hell, we like sex too, still. We do it. Eh, Sharon? We want to do it even more. Now that we have the experience and so forth, you know, and we've reached a certain age, it's like we don't give a fuck about how it is. Just reach out to us. And we will continue to create our own families. So this, I think, is probably the most important area for elders. Now, we've faced the uncertainty, the hostility, outright rejection, violence, acceptance, tolerance. We've been ignored. We feel fear, self-hatred, identity confusion, loneliness, isolation, and shame. We've done all of that. And some of them we might still do. We still have, you know, we've protected ourselves as best as we could from a hostile world. And sometimes in so doing, we may have picked up some bad habits or habits that impact upon our health. And all of these negative experience does take a toll on our health. So for the young ones who are listening, look at yourself, talk to folks, you know, what we go through on a daily basis, the negativity impacts us. Don't think that it's okay and think, oh, it's the same thing every day, I can live through it, whatever. It impacts you. Whether or not you recognize it or not, it does impact you. So reach out. There are services out there that you can access. Now, all the other things that impact seniors, such as high blood pressure, cholesterol, diabetes, heart disease, and cancer, affects us as LGBT persons or women who love women. Now, sometimes I tend to believe, and my research hasn't proven it yet, as I said, as I open it up wider, it probably would, that because many of us have a lower income, we are restricted in how we eat, our diet, and how we take care of ourselves. And that might put us at more risk for these aging diseases or afflictions. There's a high level of HIV and AIDS, not particularly within the women, but within our community. And that because the type of sex that we engage in is possibly higher risk. There's been no definitive proof that there is risk of HIV transmission between women who love women. But we're not just talking about women who love women. We're talking about women who love women who might have a wider range. We're talking about the bisexuals too. We're talking about everything else. And even if a woman describes herself as only involving herself with women, if you look at her history, she may have had a past history with men, and she now identifies as strictly as a homosexual woman, you know, or a woman who just has sex with women. So there is a risk. It might be small for women who have women, but Amanda talked about STIs. There are the possibility, and it's proven, STIs can be and are transmitted between women. And again, I would use myself as a proof of that. Decades ago, I discovered that I had been infected by a partner who was being unfaithful, which I didn't know about. But then when I did my regular test, oh, it showed up. So I went to my partner. I said, hey, this is what I have. And I was told, well, I don't know where you get it from. But this is how it is. We've got to take care of ourselves. We've got to do what we have to do to maintain our health. And I'll come to those things as we go along. The negativity that we face, the homophobia, the transphobia, the biphobia, not just only outside of our community, but from our own communities. This increases the level of physical and mental issues. Amanda talked about the violence within our partnerships. And we do face discrimination, we do face bans. Shahan, I think, mentioned about somebody in her survey talking about being attacked and so forth, or how uncomfortable they felt about certain things. According to a survey in Canada, seniors from our community may be as much as 5 times less likely to access needed healthcare and social services, even though we're at high risk for certain things. So my limited research showed that 62% of all the responders had a family physician. 75% of our senior respondents, though, had one. Almost 50% of the responders, and I say almost 50 because it was under 50, and we're talking about women, had a gynecologist. And I find that staggering, very surprising that we don't have a gynecologist as part of our ongoing trying to keep ourselves healthy, you know, maintaining. The senior respondents, 75% of them had, and they show now how important it is. Now, we all talk about mental health within our community, but only 15% of the respondents had a psychiatrist. None of the senior respondents did or had ever seen one. 30% of all respondents had a psychologist, and only one senior respondent had ever seen a psychologist. So we tend to believe that either it's okay for us to receive all the attacks, all the negativity upon our mental, you know, ability. We face anxieties, we have all sorts of stress related stuff, but we don't look to have it addressed. Very, very concerning. Now, when asked in my research, what are the barriers to good health? It was more or less in line with what the international surveys across Europe and North America had said, you know. People delay seeking care because of cost. So cost, you can't go to a private person, so you want to go and have to use the public health because we sometimes have no insurance or insufficient health insurance, and therefore out-of-pocket expenses are very costly. We have to use the public system, and that might be a day's wait at Mount Hope or wherever we go for it, right? Even in the private thing, if we do have the insurance and we walk into a doctor's office and all we see around us is heterosexual images. So we feel unwelcome. You know, you've got to hide. You're already not sure about opening up your or being out, and about what type of sex, who you have sex with, even though that's very important with regards to your health care. Being unwelcome does not help get us the necessary services we need. And we often go to public health when it's only a last resort. And this came so much to the forefront in 2019 when, as I was battling my health issues and trying to get back to good health, I discovered 5 women that I know in the community who was facing a cancer diagnosis. And unfortunately, they all had to undergo chemotherapy. I was a lucky one, as my doctor said to me. One of them said to me, if you had to get any one of the cancers, this is probably a good one for you because it has early warning. So I got an early warning and I did something about it. I did not face chemo and I did not face radiation. Thank you. Major surgery, yes, and it took 6 to 8 weeks to heal, but I'm here still. The need for disclosure. If we're going to be diagnosed accurately, if we are looking to figure out what's going on with us and get the right treatment, then we have to disclose. But we can't disclose if we are going to get judgment from our doctors, if we are going to be told that is against God and all these things that we hear, and if they're just going to dismiss and not treat us because they don't want to deal with those type of people here. And many of the respondents had a historic bad prior encounter with medical practitioners and therefore will not want to go to another one. So they delay and they delay and they delay, therefore putting their life at risk. Some of the women that I talked about, the 5 that I talked about, that were in stage 2, stage 3, or stage 4 of their different cancers. And all of this is because we are living in a homophobic and a heterosexist society. And we just continue and need to work on changing that. Now, I talked about the negative effects of what chronic stress can do, and everybody talks about it. Chronic stress leads to everything from the blood pressure, the cholesterol, the even arthritis apparently is stressful. You know, the body has the inflammation and all these things. So we have to work on how to reduce the stress, and that could be seeking mental health services. Our hostile society, some of the coping mechanisms that we use, alcohol, nicotine, illegal and legal drugs. And the biggest thing is keeping our secrets. These secrets can lead to addictions. So we just have to reach out to our medical practitioners and get them to change the way they do things. Don't assume that we're heterosexuals when they're getting our histories, so we can get things going. And basically that's it. Anybody has any questions?
Faye, I had a question from Facebook from Erin Green. She says, does the community need to open a senior care residential facility that caters to the wider public but prioritizes LGBTI seniors?
That is my dream. That is what we need. That is what I'm aiming for. That is my top objective.
And then Shivani said, because I know we're supposed to have the questions after, but I don't want to, oh God, like I lose it. Shivani also mentioned depression. And Okay, so it's time for my session, depression and anxiety around both aging and identity. So again, it's multiple issues. Shivani said correct medical practitioners, while educated differently, allow their personal biases and beliefs to influence the care they provide. And she's actually quite correct.
Correct. What I'm saying, they need academic and clinical training regarding how to treat with the needs of the LGBT community, and in particular, aging LGBT community.
And so we will continue our questions and answers on this session after my session. So I am going to pull out my notes and put on my timer, people, so I could keep check. Wow, I hope those who have been with us from the start are still enjoying and engaging and picking up a whole lot of information. I'm going to talk about expanding our sexual narrative, right? So we live in a society that grapples with the issues of sex and sexuality across the board. We don't have comprehensive sex and sexuality education as part of our education curriculum, whether in institutions of learning or even in community-based organizing programming. We may have a couple of parenting classes here and there or one-off HIV/AIDS management types of programs, but we don't have anything that is consistent. And I think we're hearing that with respect to all the services that we need. Within this landscape of secrecy and misinformation falls the subgroup of same-gender loving women. If we aren't addressing the needs of our heterosexual children, far less are we prepared and open to address the needs of our gay, lesbian, and queer young people, yeah? So I usually talk about sex, right? And I will touch on sex, but I want to talk about intimacy. And so Nadine was stealing some of my thunder and she didn't even realize it, but that's okay, love. I really want us, and I guess because as an older lesbian and looking back at my failed relationships, I realized one of the things that was constantly lacking throughout my relationships was that whole level of intimacy and what intimacy means. And when we look at intimacy as it's defined as close familiarity or friendships. And I think Amanda mentioned this, that sex and sexual intimacy is only one form of intimacy. We have physical intimacy. And when we think about physical intimacy, we think about all that sexual stuff, right? But physical intimacy, especially for those of us who are exploring this alternative way of loving, let's say, we could engage in other forms of physical intimacy, including holding hands, cuddling, which, you know, again, because of societal stigma, you know, while you would see other young lovers or lovers in general able to hold hands and cuddle in public, that is almost barred to us. And so that's one of the things that when we talk about intimacy and physical intimacy, how can we find that and hold on to that? And one of the things that I saw was dancing as a form of physical intimacy. And I will tell you, I have always been very resistant to that notion of physical intimacy. And dancing to me is such a sexual activity. And I dance on my own a lot, and people who see me in parties see how I express. But I think in one or two of my relationships, I actually danced privately with my partner. And the arousal was so great that it almost scared me. I pulled back because it felt, you know, in a darkened room with just two people holding each other, listening to music. It was such a beautiful experience. But if you are not accustomed to sharing in that way, it can actually be quite scary. So I also saw other forms of physical intimacy as massages and stargazing and all of those things that we can do with our partners. And then, of course, there is emotional intimacy, which is really, I think of the 5 intimacies which Nadine mentioned. We talked about physical intimacy, emotional intimacy, experiential intimacy, spiritual intimacy, and intellectual intimacy. They were saying that emotional intimacy is actually one of the hardest to form. And because it requires time, a certain level of vulnerability, and a whole lot of communication. Many of us who have come into this life have not come in on an easy road. It has been through a journey of trauma and bad experiences. And so to tell us to be vulnerable, to tell us to use our words can be very, very difficult. But if we do want to build those relationships we dream about building, it really requires us to make some very conscious decisions and conscious choices to talk to our partners, to confide, and most of all, to trust in one another and listen to those calls or emotional calls to connect. I have not been a very good listener in that regard. And I also, how I share is I have to share my own stories, right? I am one of those people who have serious trust issues. So I will enter a relationship and you have it all. I will enter with open heart. But the minute that you break the trust or something goes awry, rather than me communicating what's going on, barriers come up and the trust is broken. And I don't, have always had challenges trying to navigate back to that safe place to trust my partner. So what we know is that it takes constant effort, and that when an attachment is injured and the emotional bond is damaged, and the relationship begins to feel unsafe, insecure, or unreliable, the trust is broken. And sometimes that is very difficult to fix. But we also have, again, to lean into the vulnerability, to lean into the discomfort. And when we begin to feel that disconnect from our partner, how do we create those safe spaces that allow us to communicate, and be vulnerable, and to actively build intimacy in our relationship? And when we talk about emotional intimacy, here are some of the things that were listed. The first one was to be respectful and trustworthy, be supportive, be genuinely curious, stay informed on your partner's interest, accept yourself, and trust yourself. I think in that realm, when it came to being curious and informed of my partner's interests, I was good at that. I think where I always found challenges was around accepting myself and sharing my own vulnerability. I share my secrets and my stories, but I also share them in a very abstract way. And I don't let people in. That has always been my challenge, right, Nadine? And so I don't want to go on too long because I am already at 11 minutes. I'm keeping track. But then when I just wanted to just mention intellectual intimacy, that speaks about challenging your partner and staying interested and things that you do brain-wise, to engage with each other. And then we talk about experiential intimacy, and I liked what I saw and I read. It said, catching flights, not feelings. And I've heard that phrase before, catching flights and not feelings. And it speaks to when shit happens in the relationship. When shit happened in my relationships, what I did was to seek solace in other people's arms, right? Rather than trying to address the situations in my own relationship, right? And what this talks to is doing things with your partner. So, you know, stuff is going around. Take trips, travel. And if you don't have money to travel, volunteer, do stuff that builds awareness that y'all could do together outside of just the two of y'all, that broadens your horizons and build that critical bond in your relationship. And of course, there's spiritual intimacy, which does not only refer to religious experiences, but also to growth and meditation. And just, you know, it really is true if you connect with a person on many different levels, right? Intellectually, physically, emotionally, spiritually, then I think that it provides that foundation which can stand some of the challenges. And as lesbians and women who love women, you know, we have to deal with all the shit from the outside that come at us. It is important to be able to fortify our relationships, yeah? So I said intimacy can exist beyond the bonds of intimate partner relationships. And this is where Faye was talking, you know, because like me, I am not in a relationship. I have failed that relationship, and I'm doing this journey right now alone. And as we grow older and we may not be in an intimate partner relationship, or we have experienced really bad breakups, that does not mean that we still don't seek intimacy or that we still don't need intimacy. And that intimacy may just have to present itself in other forms. And that could be through our friendships. And as old people, you know, even if we ain't having sex, girlfriends, we could sit and talk about how much sex we used to have and how great it was, and all that good
and share
stuff.
stories.
Exactly, you know, to share war stories. And as same gender loving women, we share the same internal feelings of love, desire, sexual yearnings, and urges as our other fellow sexual beings. However, how we engage in sex differs. Again, because this is not something most of us can engage in discussions with our parents, siblings, and friends. We learn through our engagement with others, which can be good, and as many of us know, not so good. And I'll give you all some scenarios. For some of us, our first sexual encounters, regardless of our orientation, are with persons of the opposite sex. Whether good or bad, because our desires lie in the same gender, in same gender loving, these entanglements, I'm stealing Jada word, these entanglements could lead to trauma, yeah? Because, you know, what we've heard from people and through our own experiences is that from early, we had that desire for relationship with people who look like us, right? But because of society and the pressures that we face, we engaged in relationship with men. And they may not have been bad relationship, but when you're fucking or having sex or making love, and it doesn't have that meaning, you know, you're fooling the partner and you're fooling yourself. And you don't bring your true self or your fuller self to that encounter, right? And that could lead to trauma for yourself and for the other person. And because we have internalized shame around our desires, many a times we don't take time to explore our own bodies, right? Because again, growing up, sex, our sexual organs, our vaginas, weren't things that we were encouraged to look at, to explore. And I have here, and I fully believe this, that before sharing ourselves with others, that it's important to learn ourselves, to explore how to pleasure ourselves. And if you feel shame around your own sex organs, how can you effectively communicate your needs and wants to another partner? So I will tell you, take a mirror and look at your pussy. Look at it good. I will tell you, open your lids, look inside your vagina. Take your finger and put it in there and taste it. Taste yourself. I mean, we're quick to put our mouths on all other people's sexual organs, right? Whether you're sucking dick, eating pussy, which is my favorite, etc. But how many of us have ever taken the time to explore our own bodies, playing with our breasts, squeezing our nipples, arousing ourselves, learning what feels good to us? It is important. And I will tell you why. I learned early in my sexual life, and many of you all know I started having sex at an early age, really with the mindset of pleasing other people. So I got really good at it. In the years that I interacted and had sex with men, I think I was probably an adequate sex partner. I laid there and let you do whatever you wanted to do, and thought, okay, I was giving pleasure. I was a very passive lover. And then I found women, and I was like, oh my God. I became a very assertive lover, and my goal was still again around pleasing the other person. What can I do to make you have an orgasm? I want to eat your pussy, suck it, whatever you wanted, I did. And I remember on many occasions having partners ask me, Sharon, what do you like? What can we do for you? And I will tell you all honestly, I never knew. I did not know what pleased me. I would get an orgasm. I would get a high of getting my partner an orgasm. That was how I enjoyed sex. My pleasure came from your pleasure. But really and honestly, I couldn't identify what I enjoyed, what made me come. I believe in masturbation. That's one thing that I had learned early too. Not internal masturbation. My masturbation came from stimulating my clitoris. So I would rub a pillow between my legs, and that made me come, right? And I got so really good with that, and I call that cerebral sex. I could create these fantasies in my head and have the most amazing orgasms with nobody present, right? But when it came to being able to articulate my desires and feelings and wants to another person, I just didn't have the language. I didn't have the communication skills, and I didn't trust myself to be vulnerable enough to someone else. And I remember in one of our sessions earlier this month, I think it was Micah had mentioned being able to engage in sex without any level of intimacy. And I thought, wow, because for me, I always have to get I've never had a one-night stand. I don't know what it means to just give sex freely. It is always all of this to me, and involved a lot of coupling. So much so that we find ourselves, many of us in our community, moving from relationship to relationship. Because we don't know how to please ourselves, we haven't focused on our own sexual development. What we do after a relationship ends, and we don't know how to be intimate outside of a relationship, we go right on to the next relationship seeking that intimacy. We don't stop and say, hey, I wonder if I could get that intimacy from my friendships, from Faye, from Nadine, because we've been so programmed to think about sex and sexuality in a coupling, sexual, physical aspect. And I'm down to 1 minute. Okay, I think I talked about most of this stuff. Okay. Right. I said when I started engaging in same gender loving and sex, while my method changed, meaning that I was more active, my goal was the same, pleasing my partner. However, I became more assertive and adventurous. I derived sexual gratification from my partner's orgasms. However, there was a one-sidedness to this approach. For when asked what gave me pleasure, I honestly could not answer. I have never allowed myself to fully submit sexually. I know how to please myself. As I said, masturbation is my thing, but I never give much thought to how to climax in the arms of another person. So let's go back. It is essential for healthy sexual engagements to know oneself, right? As I said, take a look at the beauty between your legs. Touch your clitoris, your labia, taste your juices, play with your nipples, look at yourself in the mirror, naked. Get comfortable with yourself. In that way, once you are ready and choose to engage, and hear my words clearly, choose to engage with others, the sense of urgency would be lessened. And you could spend more time building the intimacy that can heighten the experience for both parties. Of course, the narrative differs in the event of random sexual encounters and polyamorous encounters. However, the premise is the same. Invest the time to explore yourself sexually for your own self as well as those you encounter. Also build your sexual language and communication skills. Many of us live in our heads, right? Who lives in their heads? I have guilty as charged. We expect because our partners have the same physiology that they should know how to please us. Not really. I have been with women who believe that hyper-masculine performance is what is required. However, the instruments being used are artificial and not a natural extension of their bodies and can hurt, injure, and may not always cause pleasure. The use of sex toys and other sexual stimulants should be discussed before diving under the sheets. A gentle introduction may be needed. Don't be afraid to be adventurous. There are so many sexual positions and tricks that are not talked about, and I think Amanda referred to that. Some of that you invent yourself. I had a partner who loved to eat my ass. And I was like, whoever thought that shit really felt good, eh? Anyway, I would close my offering by saying, loving yourself is really the key to loving another, as I am still learning. There is no age limit to building your intimacy and sexual toolkits. If what you desire is long-term committed relationships, physical, emotional, intellectual, experiential, and spiritual intimacies are required. If you want to engage in healthy sexual encounters, learn what pleases you by pleasuring yourself first. On the note of health, and we are going to mention health, I hope. On the note of health, women who engage in sex with women are also at risk for breast, cervical, ovarian, and uterine cancers. I don't want to hear you don't like anything going into your vagina. Annual pap smears, whether or not you are sexually active, should be done. Go get, yeah. And also annual mammograms if there's a history of cancer. Diet and exercise are key to living healthy, sexually fulfilled lives. Because if you want to fuck in all different positions, hello, you gotta remain flexible, yeah? All right, and I think that's it for me, good people. So actually, I think we're supposed to have a little question and answer session now for Faye and I. So people, I'm going to open the floor.
Sharon, in the Zoom chat, Rain said during your discussion, she said, whereas I have had the opposite, a lot of sexual intimacy, and have learned about long distance lovemaking, I also saw a therapist. So I saw a therapist, and therapist recommended dance as one way you can lead, and the other has to trust the leader. So that's what Rain's contribution to your while you were talking just now.
Yes, and that's it, yeah. So, and I guess that's about giving over trust. I also see Shivani had here, what about celibate relationships? Or when one partner has a stronger sex drive than others? Well, Shivani, that's my new journey now, right? I was thinking that maybe I was asexual, and Nadine corrected me. She said, no, you're not asexual, Sharon. You're being celibate. And this is the first time in my adult life that I am not in a relationship at 53 years old. And it is scary, and it can be lonely at times. But I think if ever I am to have another relationship, I really want to be able to present in my healthiest and best way. Hi, Rain. You have to unmute.
Okay. I love the whole topic. I wish I had shared the information with my friends. Sharon, nice to see you. I hope you're doing well up there. Yeah, I've you know, as a young person, sex all over the place. Men, you know, girlfriends, whatever. But the funny thing is, something hit me, and I want to share this. I don't know if you guys know, but I am married. I met my wife 12 years ago. We got married in 2015. And most of the time, I could only spend 2 months at a time in the summer in Trinidad. 1 week for spring break, 2 weeks for Christmas. So basically, when you look at it, it's basically 3 months of the year we would be together. Multiply by 11 years. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But one day she said to me, and I was telling her, honey, I want you, I miss you, I want to touch you, I'm horny, blah, blah, blah. And she goes, but honey, we making love right now. And that thing hit me like a ton of bricks, because we forget that it helps us. You know, you're talking about talking to your partner and communicating. It's important how you talk to your partner, because that's really an extension of your body and your mind.
Mm.
So it's not only dependent on the physical structures of your body. If I didn't have my arms, you know, if I had throat cancer, but how would I still make love to I start with my mind. And a lot of young people don't know about that discipline. I love everything you've said and you guys have shared up to when I came in. But one of the things I try to tell my gay friends, to my younger friends, and I say, a baby takes 9 months to be born. Try to put 9 months between one relationship and another.
Mm.
Try to take time for your, does that ring? Does that help? Try to take, because it's very hard for us as lesbians. We're heartbroken, we're lonely, we're looking for somebody. We feel that we have to be with somebody to validate ourselves. You know, if you're young and you ain't doing it, something wrong with you.
Mm.
But I have friends, my wife was not with anybody for 8 years. And I was like blown away. And she said, no. She would meet 1 or 2 people that were attractive, but a lot of times people come onto her and they were with partners, and she is not into that. And I have done crossing of the boundary lines kind of thing, because as you talk about sexual problems, trauma, whatever, many of us don't learn about boundaries. So we don't learn about how to set up the boundaries for ourselves to protect ourselves, but we don't know how to cross the boundary line in a healthy way.
True, true. Thank you, Rain. Thank you, Rain. Do we have anybody else who wants to jump in?
Amanda has her hand up. So
Okay,
Hi,
go ahead.
Sharon. Sharon, there's one thing I want you to talk some more about. You mentioned hyper masculine performances, especially within relationships, and how these are sometimes negatively expressed in sexual violence, and how this affects the individual's navigation of sex and sexuality. Could you talk some more about that, please?
I think, okay, so when again, I guess because as women, same gender loving women are navigating the space, right? And learning, and if you feel more boyish, let's say, if you feel more boyish, and society, and you look at society, just like how our young boys look and model what the older boys are doing or men are doing, same thing with our young lesbians who may be more butch. They look and think, oh my God, this is what it means to present as male in a relationship. So they come into the relationship and they believe you're coming to have sex with me, a lesbian, right? I'm not a heterosexual woman desiring a penis necessarily, right? So you're coming to have sex with me, a lesbian, with a strap-on, no problem. I rock with strap-ons too, no problem. But when you come and not understanding or your perception of what masculine lovemaking is, and you come with that trusting and that ramming, and I'm telling you because I've had it done to me, and having been made love to by men, it was not that experience. But again, because there's no discussion, who teaches young masculine presenting women or transitioning women, how does lovemaking take shape in the form of a strap-on, And so, you're not mashing up my pussy, sorry. And I could remember that physical kind of pulling back. And it was like, and because I also lack the skills to say, that fucking hurt. I was just like, that's not going in me, And it was the person themselves was fine, but it was the lovemaking is so key. That's why I tell people, I tell my fucking self, not tell people, I tell myself. Communication is key. Use your words and talk and communicate. I don't know if that helped or if that answered the question, Amanda.
Yes, it does. Thank you. One thing that you said that I think is absolutely important that we should take note of is that people don't have spaces to learn these things. So cisgender men, cisgender women are taught gender within the home, and this information is reinforced outside of the home. But in queer spaces, women who express themselves in hyper-masculine ways, and I'm sure men who express themselves in hyper-feminine ways as well, are in an adult stage sometimes, or I shouldn't just say in an adult stage, but even at young adult stage as well. Now navigating what gender feels like in terms of its performance. And sex is included in that, obviously. So people are learning not only about sex, but they're learning about what they think sex should be. They're reproducing what they think sex should be. So they're reproducing how they think a man fucks a woman,
Okay.
Sometimes those ideas are very negative ones, sometimes violent ones, sometimes damaging ones. So thank you for Sharon for discussing that.
But I also, Amanda, that I think it was our last session. Oh my God, I learned so much new words. I learned, like, I could talk about what I feel. But y'all, I learned new language. I learned about essentialism, gender, right? And I learned about gender performance. So I never thought about gender as something that I acted out. I thought gender was something that was who I was.
Yeah.
And so I was like, shit, that you don't understand how that has stuck with me, Marcus. That conversation with Marcus Kassoon, I think, was one of the most enlightening conversations. I learned so much from you and Marcus that night. Anyone else?
Yeah.
Anyone else? Before we go
Sharon,
into
just some kudos to you from the PrideTT Management Committee chat. Kennedy, Keita, and Micah send their regards, and they love your segment.
thank you.
So
And
yes,
these are young men, right?
yes, ma'am. Brandy, I see Brandy has her hand up.
Go ahead, Brandy, sweetheart.
I'm sorry to join this so important conversation because I come in the middle of it and I had the pleasure of hearing Sharon, who have always blessed me with so much to carry on every day as a trans woman because, I mean, I have the same challenges every day, you know, I have to train men. If men see you as an object, they see you as sex, they see you for you know, bend over, cock up, so push, so, you know, as they see you on the street, and then they're talking about relationship, but they're seeing in their mind what they feel, and, you know, a trans woman is supposed to be. I am a biological woman. I am biological, and I'm not, you know, what people may want to think. Sorry. And if I'm telling you, in my mind, sometimes I just say, like I was just telling Eswick just now, I see, you know, I feel as a lesbian and I feel women just take more care of me than men because how the women and I get along, if they don't hear me for the day and they didn't hear from you, why you didn't call, how you, something, what's up, what's going on, you want her beer? You know, like we want to smoke a weed now, you know, something like that. Because I have a lot of lesbian friends, butch lesbian friends, that they always reach out to me because they appreciate who I am, as you know, because I am a biological woman. I'm sorry, that's how I look at it, and I love the relationships that I'm being faced with, and I have the same challenges, you know, conversation about spiritual intimacy, sexual, and you know, my health is also a big question because trans women health is important. But I am telling my friend, see, you know, I have to go and take a test. And what is you say you always working in a clinic, you're always in some ministry. And when I tell him, I say prostate, the boy jump like if you know, what the fuck you telling me? This conversation, I say, hey, remember, all what you see, you have to understand. I have two things to study. When I done take these hormone therapy thing, I still have to study my biological sex. I still have to, you know, and I was asking questions around it. What's the side effects? What to look for? Because I'm really scared of, I don't know, I know everybody in the world, like in Trinidad and Tobago. I feel if I had to go and do a prostate test, I had to go somewhere, China. Because I don't know who to ask. I don't know where to go. And I can't hold these conversations with the professionals I know in these spaces that I go all the time because we talk about, you know, human rights violations. We talk different things, but to say prostate, I don't know how to have that conversation with them. And I'm really glad when I came here and sitting down and I'm hearing you, Sharon, share this. It's still easy, but it's a challenge that I would have.
Yeah, I'm looking for a pen to write down because I think, and I'll follow up with that, and maybe Amanda could talk to Dr. Joseph about getting some referrals for a trans woman to get a prostate check, because I think that it is
a good
essential.
safe place, a place where you will feel real comfortable. It's kind of hard to talk about that because the mind frame and where you are and who you are is something totally different. Oh, you have to go back. I don't know. Well, they say life just get hard at a certain age. It really getting hard now. Really getting hard.
And Brandy, you know why I did like this with my finger when you start to say you might be a lesbian? I say, oh my God, because don't forget all them young fillies already expressing interest on all the young fillies on this side too, on their already talking about how they have a crush on Brandy. Hello, all you don't step to Brandy unless you have some dogs, right? Coins.
I mean,
no suffering you do that.
Just come out and step out on a day-to-day basis, So I don't know what you're talking about, but yeah, some individuals in Pride U, we have a crush on Brandy. It didn't matter for that there, but Brandy just step out and it just be like, damn.
All right, before we get totally off track, we have one more session to go, which I know is a critical session. And Nadine is going to try. She's been taking notes about all of us discussed. And really, Nadine has been our psychosocial savior for many of us over the years. And I want to turn this over to Nadine to share with us, what you've heard and what we can do.
Thanks, Sharon. And I realize it's after 10, so I'm really not going to keep it too long. And I just want to kind of bring together from the beginning of the conversation with Epiphany and Sharon and weave a thread up to what Sharon has said. And there's one common thing that's come up, that people want commune and community. Yes, particularly, queer people. And when I say queer people, and I'm going to relate it to some of Sharon's conversation around intimacy and the different types of intimacy. I first want to say that we cannot expect people to do healthy intimacy relationships when they didn't get to practice intimacy before they got into relationships. Yeah?
Yeah.
So we assume that intimacy only happens when we lay down next to somebody. And as Sharon says, there's a kind of intimacy that is really needed, like holding hands and being close to other people and all that. And it's not just their lover. If you didn't get to practice good, safe physical intimacy with your family and your friends as a young person, it's very difficult to have healthy physical intimacy with an adult in an intimate, romantic way. Intimacy requires vulnerability and safety. Yes, those two things. And if you have not been in a space that allows you to be vulnerable and be safe being vulnerable, it's going to affect all of your relationships.
That's right.
Yeah. So people's calling for this safe space for us to have is really people calling for a space where they could be intimate with others. And I'm not talking about sexual intimacy, that, Sharon mentioned intellectual intimacy, that I could share my thoughts, my ideas, my values with people who I identify with. And I could even challenge other people, challenge people's ideas and thoughts in a safe way. Yes. And a lot of times, particularly for those of us who've been raised by Caribbean parents, we really were not allowed to practice intellectual intimacy. I can't share my thoughts with you. It's not safe for me to tell you the truth. It's not safe for me. Yes. And therefore, we can't even do it with our partners. Yeah. So when we're talking about building a safe space for queer people, is a space not only for like events, and I think that this is a great idea, particularly for COVID time. We've been intimate right now.
Yeah.
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 And when after COVID, how could we create a space and we can't be saying, oh, there's no safe spaces. There are no safe spaces because we haven't created a safe space. It's on us to do it. We can't expect other people to do it for us. Yes. And when we create this space, we have to make sure that we hit the markers of intimacy. So it's not just yes, we can create a space where we can dance and screw or whatever. Yes. But we can create a space where we can do spiritual intimacy, meaning that we could share our spiritual ethos with others. Yes, it doesn't have to be a church space, but we could be a space where we could meditate, we could share our spiritual desires, thoughts, whatever, safely with other people. Yes?
Without judgment.
Without judgment. Yes, but part of other people get to commune with each other. Other people get to fellowship. And that fellowship, sometimes we wonder, why these people be going to church every Sunday, but they get something out of it. Yes? Fellowshipping makes you connect to people. So how could we create that kind of fellowship in a queer safe space? Yeah?
To feel like we belong.
And to not just feel like, but to know that we belong.
To know that we belong, yeah.
To know that we belong. Sharon also mentioned experiential intimacy. And yes, it's not just like, flying away to Bora Bora with your partner, but actually it's also about, and experiential intimacy actually helps build our resilience. It's a kind of where we share experiences, not just the fancy big event experiences, but we cry together when we lose somebody from the community. When there's pain and discrimination and job loss, we experience that together, and that also helps us when we support each other through those moments. When we experience a next job loss, we know that we can survive. Yeah, it builds our resilience. When we experience a next discriminatory moment, we know we can survive because we know we have a band of people together with us. Yeah. So I think really what this whole conversation has taught me is that we really need to create a space, and not just a space for events and during time like Pride Month or whatever, but a year-long space where people could come and go, share, get support, give support, and really have the full experience of commune and intimacy that will make you a healthier person. Healthier in your personal relationships, in your romantic relationships, but also healthier in your family relationships. Because once you have other people having your back, you can even deal with your homophobic family. Yeah? I don't want to talk much longer, but I don't know if anybody has any questions, has anything that they want to add. Yeah?
Nadine, can you share, because for me, beyond the family and beyond the external relationships, because I'm good at externalizing, how do we create that intimacy within ourselves?
Of course, a lot of it is self-acceptance. And so self-acceptance, and I think Amanda said it in her session about how we treat with other people. But you have to learn to forgive yourself. Know that you're going to make mistakes and it's okay, you're human. I think a lot of us, because we were this kind of crazy educational social system that we grew up in, we once we make a mistake, not do others punish us, but we punish ourselves. Yeah? And we be really hard on ourselves. A mistake is essential for growing. And if you see your mistake and you are accountable for your mistake, you can grow. So you can actually, sometimes you can even be thankful for the error that you've made because it showed you something that you've not known before. So be forgiving. Yes. Be accountable for what you do. Yeah. And when you're accountable, you do differently. Yeah, and it's okay. It is okay that you've hurt people. It's okay. Then you know what to do differently and how not to hurt people. But know that okay, I hurt somebody because I was hurt and I didn't know better.
Thank
Yeah,
you. So
yeah.
I see some familiar names on the Zoom. Would anybody else like to share or ask questions? I don't want to call out names, but I've seen people I love. I see somebody blonde that I've never seen before, a Miss Huron or Mr. Huron. Anybody else would like to share anything they gained from this session, or they have any questions or concerns? This is the time to ask, all you don't be asking when the shit is over and wish you had asked.
Two things.
Okay, hold on a second, Rain. I see somebody else smiling.
Okay.
No, I'm just saying hello. I'm Title Heron, Jamaican based in Barbados. I'm late to joining, but just very happy to be on the call. I got nudged by some friends of mine who were also listening in and say, oh no, it's a really good conversation. So I'm just want to say that thank you so much. I appreciate what I've been hearing so far and happy to be here. I came on too late to ask any questions. So I'm just enjoying the sharing and the listening so far. And just also expressing a desire that if you are having anything else planned for going forward, I'd love to be able to listen and perhaps ask a question at the next time.
Great, and it's tight. And pronounce your first name for us.
Title Heron from the Women and Development Unit, UA Open Campus, and also We Change in Jamaica.
Oh, welcome, lovely to have you. Jamaica and Barbados, all in one in the house.
We're all women and so me good. You know, business too much about that part. Thank you so much again, everyone.
Right, we're at the end of our Pride celebrations. This weekend would be tying it up. But if you wish to, you can always go back to PrideTT's Facebook page, and we have all the lives there. So even though it's a Zoom meeting, we've also shared it live. So the videos are there if you can go back and have a look and reach out with your questions to whomever. We'll get them answered for you.
And
Great job.
Rain, you were going to ask?
Are you guys doing these discussions just for the month of Pride, or do you have any plans to continue doing this type of networking in the future, like once a month or once a week or something? Nadine is shaking her head. Once a week.
I think we should do it once a month. I think we should not just for Pride, but we're talking about the need for safe space. But we can't meet face to face because of the COVID thing now. But I think we can do this because this really can help in building intimacy and building community.
And building community, because as Sharon is teaching the intimacy, and then I never knew, like getting to know Faye, and now I'm learning about you. So I'm meeting new people.
Well, I would tell you, we did use this media because of COVID, but the success that using this medium has, PrideTT intends to, or I shouldn't say intend, I mean not push the thing too much. We are and have been discussing doing meetings like this and discussions like this in the future. I don't want to push the team into a yes yet, but that's probably where it's leaning to. Yeah?
Yeah. Well, when I had my conversation with Amanda, and when we were talking about the session, Amanda's last question to me was, what are the next steps, Sharon? And I say, the next step could be whatever you want it to be, beautiful. But really, and I know, you see, once we start having these conversations, and that's exactly how the Women's Caucus evolved. It was that once we got together, we recognized not only that there were concerns and issues, but just being together. The early days, meeting in office, we used to bring food, Faye, remember? We'll all bring a dish, and just being able to sit down. We have cried, we fight, we get ugly, but at least we knew that was the space that allowed us to do that.
How about the bowl with the anonymous questions in it? People put the questions in, then we took it out and we answered the person's question, even if they didn't want to ask it face to face.
And so what all of this is telling us, that there is still a need. And you know what? Up until there is true freedom and equality and whatever, we will always have those needs, right? Whether we are trans, whether, you know, because there's a thing about being hidden and you know, that shit is fucked up, yo.
Mm-hmm.
We're not built to be hidden.
Nope.
Okay, carry on. What else? I don't want to, this is not my time. This is everybody else's time. Anything else anybody wants to share? Their own experiences? I don't, Shelly, are you on? Or did Shelly leave?
Who's Shelly?
Shelly is my friend.
Why can't see? Who's
No, I'm
Shelly?
not saying she might be gone. She might be
She
gone.
might be gone.
Yeah.
That was somebody who I had invited to, you know, any sorts of spiritual kinds of questions, because that always comes up.
Yeah.
Hi, Sharon. I have a question for Brandy. Brandy, could you tell us more about the politics of identifying as a biological woman?
Firstly, I must say, a lot of women in society would not agree with me when I said I am a biological woman, because a lot of persons does not understand gender and sex. And there's a lot of miscommunication. Most biological women who don't understand what trans women, what is a trans woman, where they came from across the spectrum of non-binary, non-gender conforming, and then being trans. You have to be, there's a lot, the process is physical, it's a physical and a mental process to be trans. And when you
what?
Says that when you reach the stage of transitioning, being a trans woman, it's some process is be so hard. You come from so much broken spaces. Some of them before the trans, they have to deal with HIV. They have to deal with family. They have to deal with being gay. Then they have to be dealing with homophobic people and transphobic. It's a lot of, you know, there's a lot of disconnection. And when you reach to that stage and I am trans, I am very proud to say as a trans woman who I am. And you know, I would stand in any place and identify. I do, it has no way, nothing could break me down. And my beliefs is my beliefs. And I just as I respect everyone's, you know, whoever they are and whatever they do, I would want the same to me. So we need to have more of this, because a lot of miscommunication is out there about trans women. Nobody knows how people just feel trans people is, you was a boy yesterday and you're dressing up today. It's so much, you know, that is not being shared and so much is not being discussed. And the politics is a lot. It's a lot that is out there. Then that a trans person goes through before, you know, you can identify to be trans. And you know, with strong women on this panel, you know, Irene and Faye and Sharon and you, Amanda, and these younger ones from PrideTT and Rudy and
Hardback Rain.
And Rain, you understand? You know, I am so really, there's a lot of support. There's a lot of support, and I want to share my experience, because a lot of trans women I know will not do this because of the broken spaces they come from, and they don't, you know, they will reach out to me and talk to me, and, you know, we will go in depth, you know, about intimacy and, you know, but to say they will do this publicly, they are afraid. And, you know, that emotional, you know, that emotional stress, they have to, for me, you know what, I ease my stress by no psychologist, no, I is my own psychologist. When I really have a problem, I go in and then sit down and talk to you, because most of my friends every 2 weeks they're nearly having a nervous breakdown, or they're having this, or they're having that. Fuck all of that. Here what to do, live life the best way, because everything have politics, and you have to know how to figure out to match around. Just as how in the early days you have to run from bottle dance to bottle. You have to know how to
police.
politics, the police, the comments. You know, you have to learn these things became. That was those were the stepping stones. Now you have to. I learn how my battles. I know what to fight and what to leave alone, who to answer and where to go, and that is how my challenges. And but I always say I have good people at my side, and I always say thank God for that, thank God for that. Because in 2006 when I met Mrs. Martinez, I say, Mrs. Martinez, here what? I bring in my community here for you. I want them to be tested. I want them to know a space where they could feel comfortable. They don't know that. She turned around and she asked me, how you could get these people to come here? I say, I bring in 20. I bring in 20. When she see the 20 people, she said, Lord Jesus. She didn't believe. She didn't believe it had 20 people out there. And was, begging and, looking and, had no hope. And the thing is, as I said with the churches and them, they go to church looking for love, looking for this thing, love. And love starts within you, with you. I love me. I don't care. You see me? I love me. I love to spray perfume and go and lie down in my bed and put the sheet over my head and smell me. That I not waiting for a man to tell me I smell good. I know I smell good when I do that. Then I get up and go somewhere.
I have a question to you. So, Brandy, in my interaction with you and the other trans woman, we've built a relationship, and I could say that I'm comfortable and I know trans women. Where are the trans men? And what is the trans coalition? Do you all have trans men?
Yes, we do. We support them with the replacement therapy. We're supporting them. But you know what the trans man is? Let me explain it. Trans man is really men,
Yes.
There's not a time. They have one drop of woman blood in them. Man always looking for a dollar. They always have to work. The priority is something in the pocket. These trans men I have, hey, all the pain, man. They rather focus on, no, I understand their challenges. I understand it's hard for them because they're fighting against all the norms, right? And they have to have their financial stability, and all of them are in relationships. So when I ask them to do something for me, and it come on a day when them had to work, or them had to go out, or them had to do this, and they will do what they have to do before. They will call and apologize. You're a real man, like, oh, men is always set you up, just so them just do it. And send a nice long love text. Yeah, that's how them is. They have no woman in them. None, no compassion. None.
Oh God. Sharon, Sharon.
Hey, dog them out, boy.
Man, no good. Okay.
I just got a message from a trans man who's not on the Zoom call but listening. Well, is listening on I don't know if through Facebook or the Zoom call, and said, loving the topic. I'm listening.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, yeah.
But we really do support trans men. We have the support for them. We try to encourage them, in different ways, and to give them the necessary tools they need to go forward. And they're least at risk. The population is very small, and it's actually growing. It's growing tremendously because at one time I only knew one trans male, and now I knew in Trinidad, and now I know a lot more. So it's a growing population, and they always reach out to me. You know, they talk with me. But again, they are male. They are male. I am female, and I have to respect the male. They are male, and I love them for that. They apologize. So it's very nice. They're very, very nice and caring. But that's it.
I have a question for Brandy.
Okay.
What's that?
Brandy, since you're a black woman and you're thinking about becoming lesbian, would you happen to have Velvet Country?
Velvet Country? What is Velvet?
Velvet Country
What is Velvet Country?
Velvet Country. My wife will laugh to it because, you know,
okay.
Velvet Country is that space on a black woman's back that you enter and you smell no perfume, just the skin cells. The wonderful, awesome smell of a black woman's back. That's why I'm so in love with Viola
you know
Davis.
about this?
Oh my gosh.
I am learning. What is
yes,
it called?
If you're talking about intimacy,
right.
Take away that perfume business. Soap and water. And let me tell you, the skin of a person, I ain't so good with men with that, but the skin of a woman's arm, body, breast, back, neck, hairline. If you don't have that perfume to fake you out, you will discover so many enchanting smells. And that black, smooth, velvet skin on a black woman's back, you're going through. You're going through.
You actually make me think about breaking my, oh my God, I'm going to be focused on backs, y'all.
My wife is a white woman, but she has heard me talk and she will laugh at me because she know I ain't going nowhere. But I've been there, and I will tell you, ladies, if you're free, single, and disengaged like a toilet, go and find out about Velvet Country.
Velvet Country, yo. Check out Amanda touching her hair. Maybe
I'm loving it. I'm loving it.
So, Brandy, watch out. If I only catch your slack, what's menu? If you only, and listen to me, if you see you put on a nice thin strap top there, just a little thin strap, and that shoulder skin showing, and my nose get close to that,
oh my gosh, I love it.
I will be in trouble.
So this is what we're talking about. Sex.
Yes.
I mean, Sharon, we needed a whole section on erotica alone. I mean,
I know.
Just take away the perfume and all it will smell.
Young people, Epiphany, Shahan, I noticed these topics going around.
Hi.
And you almost fall off the bed.
But I'll give you one word of advice.
I agree with her.
Never ever get crazy. and let somebody fuck you in your eyeball. Don't do that.
Okay.
Don't do that one, Sharon. Don't do that one.
In my eyeball. Okay, I'll take that. But
it came up in a conversation and we were just playing around funny and we tried it out.
Let's think this out. Okay.
Well, I would just confirm that medically speaking, yes, don't let people fuck you in your eyeball.
But I just want to give, yes, Nadine?
I have to leave.
Okay.
So thank you so much, everybody.
Thank
this was
you
really
so much,
great.
I
enjoyed, and I'm looking forward to doing this again next month. Okay.
Okay. So we're going to wrap up in about 5 minutes, y'all. But I wanted to give Epiphany and Shahan, because we started this session with y'all and with the questions that y'all raised. Do you feel based on all that you've heard tonight, that at least some of those questions were answered and that you are in a position to articulate our feedback to those young people that weren't on the call?
Well, first of all, Shahan left to get food. She said you're all talking too much. Yes, but to answer your question, yes, I do think that a lot of the insight you all gave was very beneficial, because a lot of what you all said I have been asked sometimes, and I'm like, I don't know. So I'm glad that I can say I do know now, especially that tidbit about the back, because all jokes aside, I know what she's talking about. I really do, because I thought it was just the soap, but now that I'm thinking about it, it's like, no, that's not his skin, that's her actual skin.
There you go. So let's have closing words from the panel. So, Faye, what do you want to leave us with tonight?
We seniors have a lot to offer. We are still sexual beings. Don't write us off, and check your biases, then come check us.
Thank you. Amanda.
2 points. One, just noticing that this is in itself a safe space that was created, and to commend the team for putting together this panel. Thank you, Sharon, and beyond Sharon, thanking PrideTT for just moving with the times, because I think Nadine was absolutely right in that the Zoom presentations, the digital presentations created itself a type of intimacy that we did not necessarily maximize on prior to 2020. So thanks for the creation of this special type of safe space. And beyond that, I wanted to make a comment on just the amount of work, listening to Brandy just now, to notice the amount of work in education and undocumented work in education that trans women are doing all the time. Even with all our understanding of the complexities of gender and gender as lived experience and gender in terms of gender studies, trans women are still here bringing information to us because this is something that they live and continue to complicate on a daily basis and continue to legitimately express on a daily basis. So I just want to say thanks to Brandy and thanks to all trans women who continue to do this undocumented educational work within the queer community.
Brandy, any last words?
My last words is going to, I'm really happy. I wish Pride could have a few more days, the month just done. And we should have more of these, because I was on, actually I talked about everything that we could have ever talked about. It must not end here. And then next year we have a calendar come up again. I think there should be more engagement because it's so educational. And as there's a lot, people hear me, a lot of persons hear me because they're on these fields live and they're all about, and then they hear the recording and somebody sending it on WhatsApp all over, and they're hearing the conversation, listening to what the group sessions is all about. And I want us to do more like this because there's a lot of people out there that, you know, they're very, very much disconnected and they want somebody, somewhere, some guidance, and they don't know who to ask and where to go. So I think we should continue to do more like this.
Thank you. And on my end, when I left Trinidad 2 years ago, I left as a broken person. You know, Nadine has taught me not to say damaged, and said that I was disconnected, and I have disconnected. But when this came up, when the preparation talks, those emails went out, Faye would remember, and I'd jump in and I'd say I was just going in to listen and give a little feedback, and found myself engaged because the topics that were covered over the last few weeks were just incredibly interesting topics on religion and all, you know, stuff that really I find interesting. I find joy, pleasure, and satisfaction in LGBTQI issues. heterosexual issues don't excite me as much. This always feels like home. And so it felt like coming home over the last few weeks. And I too don't want it to end. And being in DC and being by myself, being able to see y'all, it almost felt like I was with you all and with, it was wonderful. And I want to thank you. And just like the fucking Woman Caucus sessions that we never could end, we used to go on and on because we used to spend 1 week a month, 1 day a month, and the night will start. And we just never wanted it to end because we knew that we would have to wait. But on that note, beautiful, beautiful people, I want to thank everyone who was here on the Zoom, was on Facebook Live. It was just incredible. I love you all. Let's keep on doing the work that we're doing, building our intimate relationships, taking care of our health. And also, when the fucking Zoom is off and the Facebook Live goes down, reach out. There is always someone you can talk to within the community, yeah? So good night, beautiful people. Let's wave bye. Happy Pride, happy motorcade. PrideTT20 Pride. Thank you. Have an enjoyable parade on Sunday. Bye, guys.
Have fun.
Bye. I'm trying to see how to leave. Bye.